Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club forum today. CMC connects people and ideas through community conversations at forums just like this one every week. My name is Anthony McIntosh. I am president and COO of an organization by the name of Uprise, and I am proud to serve as a member of the board of directors for CMC, as well as chair the DEI committee. We are grateful at today's presenting sponsor, Nationwide. Where are you, Nationwide? Wave your hand. There you go. Nationwide is in the house. Thank you. But we also want to appreciate and thank some of our other forum sponsors. We have the Benefactor Group. All righty. We have Besa. Besa in the house. We have Carlisle, Patchen, and Murphy. Columbia Gas of Ohio. Kramer and Associates. All righty. Oh, G2G Consultant. Installed Building Products. And the New Directions Career Center. So we're also grateful to the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch, and our host, Vue Columbus. So it takes a village, so let's give all of our sponsors and all of you a hand for being here today. So, with today's panel of passionate leaders and advocates, we'll unpack the state of Central Ohio nonprofits at one of our most popular forums of the year. To introduce our panelists, please welcome Chad Jester on behalf of today's sponsors, Nationwide. Chad?
Love Anthony's energy. So let's get to know the audience. If you work at a nonprofit, volunteer for a nonprofit, financially give to a nonprofit, raise your hand. And if you're not raising your hand, add yourself to one of those categories. Maybe start by writing a check would be great. So to make nonprofits work in our community, it really is a team effort holistically in the community. So nonprofits and the work they're doing today is challenging. If you look at data within the Columbus community around the country, it's daunting at times. And you'll hear from our panel today the work that they do, the challenges they run into, but most importantly, how they persevere to serve people in our community. But things are changing all the time within Columbus and other markets around the country. Nothing is static. It's constantly changing and evolving. It's really up to all of us to be engaged as good corporate citizens and engaged parties in our community to know what's happening with nonprofits. Volunteerism is a great way to do it. Serving on a nonprofit board is a great way to do it. Writing that check, I'll come back to again, is essential too. But it really is a partnership between philanthropy, government sector, private sector, education, community, and nonprofits to make it all work together. So the panel today is a great group of individuals who will bring diverse perspectives from their experience and their work to you today. And I would like to introduce them, if I could please. And please, panelists, wave your hand when I call your name if you would. Suzan Bradford, who is Executive Director of the Lincoln Theater. Gabrielle Fields, Executive Director of Franklinton Farms. Matthew Goldstein, CEO of Besa. My colleague Kristen Rost, who is Vice President of the Nationwide Foundation. And we have one of the most informed, engaged individuals hosting the panel today, Dan Sharpe from the Columbus Foundation. So let's get off with the work. Dan.
Thanks, Doug. Chad, thank you very much for the introduction and for your perspective and all that Nationwide does for the Central Ohio and nationwide for communities as well. Last year's luncheon was also sold out, and I'm really grateful for CMC's nimbleness in finding a larger venue to allow for more of us to participate in this conversation in this big room and if you will, a bigger table. And so I won't miss an opportunity to plug the Columbus Foundation's Big Table, which is coming back on September 25th. So please mark your calendar for that day of community conversation. And in addition to those of us that are here in the room, as you've heard, we are joined by dozens more via live stream in their virtual seats. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for engaging in today's conversation, because it is a true testament to the importance of the nonprofit sector, which is the third largest sector nationally behind retail and manufacturing. And collectively today, we're joined by board members, creative directors, finance team members, direct level staff, community health workers, and volunteers, representing organizations, as I'm fond of saying, A to Z, arts to zoos. And this panel is an exemplar, as you'll hear, of organizations that are doing the really important work from the sidewalks to the skyscrapers in our community. And there is so much to be proud of about the nonprofits meeting this moment for our community, because we cannot read headlines without seeing the successes noting our growth, our community's acceleration, and the attractiveness of our region. However, those headlines are also filled with some of our community's largest challenges, the urgency and the imperatives that we're stated by mission to meet as nonprofit organizations. And so we're going to use today's opportunity to center around honesty. The honesty of meeting that moment for our community, the honesty of oftentimes the touch and go reality of operating a nonprofit, and what does seem at times like the insurmountable challenges in the neighborhoods and the community around us. So we're going to be real, we're going to be authentic in our responses, because I think at the same time we can acknowledge and rejoice in doing this work together, while still acknowledging the fragility of the existence of the nonprofit structure and the fragility of many of those that we serve. And it is tough out there, and so I'm glad to be here with each of you today, and I'm glad to be here with this panel. And so we'll start with the first question to aid with some context of the conversation. And Suzan, we'll just start with you, and we can go down the line. If you could share a little bit about your organization's mission and what draws you to serve.
Thank you, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. First time on the CMC panel, so it's an honor to be able to share the things that I love and that I'm passionate about at the Lincoln Theater. Our mission is multifold. Being a steward for the community, being a catalyst for artists, being a beacon of hope, representing the Lincoln Theater and its community to its fullest, and also providing opportunities for a quality life through the arts.
Gabrielle, Franklinton Farms, and our mission is to nourish neighborhood well-being and connection through farming, gardening, and education. And our purpose is threefold, building on the pillars that I just named. Farming to increase food access, gardening to increase connection, not only with the land, but with each other, and education to increase nutritional literacy, environmental stewardship, and social emotional skills, because we need those too.
Good afternoon. My name is Matthew Goldstein. I'm the founder and CEO, co-founder. My co-founder, Suzan, is over there, of Besa. We are a Columbus-based nonprofit dedicated to volunteerism, community service, civic engagement. I believe, there's nothing more important than getting more people to the table to serve. It builds empathy, it builds kindness, and it builds community, and that is what we try to do each and every day. It is wonderful to be here with all of you. I am also a first-time panelist. I think you are too. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kristen Rost. I work at the Nationwide Foundation and Nationwide. The Nationwide Foundation funds in communities where our associates and members live and work. We fund in 4 main areas: food security, crisis stability. When we say crisis stability, both personal crisis as well as big community disasters, as well as social and economic impact, and children's well-being. And I think one of the things I'm really proud to work at Nationwide, you asked sort of what's our why, and It is in our founding. We were founded by farmers, and from the beginning, we've always given back. Thank you.
I love the theme of first-time panelists, long-time listeners. That's great. So, Gabrielle, Suzan, and Matthew, all of your work benefits Central Ohio, but there's an inherent component to the power of neighborhood with what you do for our community. Can you expound upon that importance of community vis-a-vis neighborhoods?
When I think of that question, Dan, I think about communal living. I think about commonality of traditions, of heritage, of customs. I think about a community that is rich in family values, things that young people, children who live in these communities can grow up with a sense of pride, sense of belonging, sense of acceptance, and from there really just providing them with opportunities to grow in their authentic self. I say that because that is me. And so I grew up on the east side of Columbus, Ohio, and the community is what shaped me. And so as I'm moving into these positions, cutting my teeth at the YWCA and nonprofit, and then moving into prevention and treatment, and then landing here at the Lincoln Theater, I wanted to really make sure that opportunities were present and affordable for artists, for young people, for our seasoned folks to be able to come to and say, this is home. I think that when we work inside a sense of community that way, humanity is able to exude itself, and also the commonality of what art does for the masses.
So when I think of community, the power of community, I want to center first three things. I want to ask everyone three questions because I like to talk with us. We're in conversation together, right? We're in conversation together, right? Okay. I'm glad you're awake. So I want to ask you three questions, and by a show of hands, and I want you all to participate too. Dan, you too. How many of you know your neighbor by name? Your neighbors at home, okay? How many of you have shared a food item or a meal with your neighbor ever? Okay, how many of you have shared a meal or food with your neighbor in the last year? Your community starts at home. And you all are leaders here because you're leaders at home and you're sharing a community. The reason that we are and we have and survive so many things, you all, when we're talking about climate, from our weather to our politics, the only way we will survive those things and the changes in those things is how we love our neighbor and how you love your community. And so community building starts, one, where you build community at home. So for me, you know, I start there because we will not survive any of the things without our neighbors. So love your neighbor, please.
Gabrielle, do you want to quickly follow up on some of the things Franklinton Farms does to intentionally build community?
Yes, so Franklinton Farms would not be here without our neighbors. The farm started in 2007 with a group of neighborhood residents with one plot of land that has grown to 12 plots of land. And still, right now, we book volunteers almost 2 months out. I don't know a nonprofit that does that, that has that foundation, right? We see Nationwide weekly. You know, we see Cover My Meds. We see our neighbors next door. You know, I can say, hey, Miss Trish, how you doing? She say, I got okra yesterday, and they picked too much. You know, you need to tell them that they need to leave some for, you know, me over here. And I saw you have volunteers. You know, our neighbors are how we function. And people are surprised by our scale of growing. But it's only because we have volunteers. It's only because of our neighbors. You know, if someone is walking somewhere they shouldn't be and they're not familiar, Mr. Johnson will come out and say, hey, what are you doing? Those berries are for the farms, you know, or you need a basket, you know. And so we would not be where we are without our neighbors and our volunteers. And so if you come, you will meet some neighbors as well who are not just farmers, but are volunteers.
And you might also meet some Besa volunteers.
Indeed.
You know, community is so interesting. I love the question because I used to think to myself, I have, I don't know, X number of friends on Facebook, but I barely know my neighbors. And so how do I build relationships with is this working? Yeah. Okay, good. How do I build relationships with the people, to your point, right next door to me? And I think volunteerism is a powerful way to do that. Not just right down next door to me, but down the street, in the community next door. One of my favorite stories is a woman from New Albany, retired woman, 60s, Caucasian, affluent, volunteering through Besa. And then she meets a young Latina woman from Columbus City Schools in her 20s, maybe late 20s, early 30s. They volunteer together and they build a relationship and they start showing up and volunteering again and again and again and build a relationship around volunteerism. And they are best friends to this day. And then what does that relationship, the ripple effect that has with the other people around them, right? Like that builds community, that builds strength, that builds understanding, that breaks down walls. That is what, to me, community is all about, and the power of volunteerism to bring people together.
I'd like to add to that as well. As we're talking about the historical sense of the Lincoln Theater, built in 1928, we're coming up on 95 years. Yay, Lincoln. Yay. Yes? Yay. Okay. So in that time, historically, the Lincoln was built to really address the segregation that was going on in our city, especially in our theaters. And so the visionaries and the Masons who were living in that community decided that they wanted to build not just one theater, but 3 more theaters in that area, so that local artists and musicians and the community to come see the jazz greats who came through Columbus, not in segregated spaces, but in open spaces. And so as we move towards our 30 years where it's set, we come back to where we are now with our rebirth from 2009, and it's my charge, it's my personal charge to make sure that that sense of community that happened 95 years ago continues to be a part of the echoing the opportunity, the feel of the community that we are creating now in the King Lincoln District. So that sense of community is so important because it allows the community's potential and promise to happen to all who comes through there.
Great. Kristen, Nationwide Associates are our neighbors too. They're in the community. From your perspective across all your markets, what trends are you seeing with nonprofits and corporate giving, and how does Central Ohio stick out?
That's a great question, Dan. But yeah, just to wrap up the community piece, our Nationwiders are your community members and are in your nonprofits volunteering across our footprint. And so in bigger areas such as the Phoenix, the greater Phoenix area, Columbus, smaller areas like Des Moines, we're seeing a lot of similar issues happening. Chad and I have been having conversations with our food bank partners across the whole United States. We're hearing consistently, it doesn't matter if you're in California, New York, here in Columbus, that the need is up. The amount differs. I think in California, they said it was, the food bank we were talking to, it was 25% up from last year. We've heard, 30%. So, but very similar numbers that you're seeing despite your geography. The one piece that I think is really important is that we need to show up. It's been interesting as we examine our volunteer data. Our volunteer numbers on work time are back to our pre-COVID numbers, which are great. So our associates are finally feeling comfortable and living into our culture. Teams are going out and volunteering. When we look out at outside work time, we're almost to pre-pandemic numbers, not quite. And I think that's just, some anecdotal evidence that I have is just a lot of us feel overwhelmed. There's a lot going on, and so to do one more thing. But we know at Nationwide the importance of volunteering. We also saw during the pandemic, for example, the effect of our volunteers not being present. I think Mid-Ohio Food Collective, we were 40% of the volunteer base, which is pretty impressive. But when 40% of the volunteer base isn't able to come out, what's that mean and what's that look like? But what I love about Nationwide is that we were in there trying to brainstorm, with our partners, with our community members. We didn't just stay home. We pivoted. We thought of different ways to volunteer. What's that look like? And you see that across, that's the one thing I can say consistently across the United States.
So Matthew, we'll follow that volunteerism thread up with a question, and maybe Nationwide, thankfully, is bucking that trend. But volunteer rates have been shown to be the lowest levels in the past 30 years. And so what are you seeing with Besa and in Central Ohio more broadly? And what does that just mean, going back to the sense of community and for our nonprofits who rely so heavily on a volunteer base that may statistically be at its lowest level in 30 years?
Yeah, 30 years ever since the government was surveying volunteer rates. It's at the lowest levels across the country, single digit, in Ohio, double digit. And so we have a huge opportunity, yes, a challenge, but also an opportunity to reverse that. And we need to, because us as a nonprofit, our nonprofit partners across this community depend on volunteers. One of my favorite stories, I don't know if Ronald McDonald House is in the room, but they were the first project we ever volunteered with. And at the time, this is going back 12 years, they had something like 15 staff members. Everyone else there was a volunteer. And Ronald McDonald House is like a medium-sized hotel. You think about the Hilton downtown, if they only had 15 staff members, you'd have a lot of angry customers. And so you think about, just with that one example, the power of volunteers to show up at a nonprofit, to pull weeds, to harvest food, to do the good work that has to happen to serve people. There's a huge opportunity. What we're seeing at Besa is actually same thing as nationwide. Our numbers are now at pre-pandemic levels because people do want to show up. You have to give them opportunities to show up that make it easy as possible for them to show up, for them to have a great experience. When they show up, something I used to think about, I used to go to Jenny's in the Short North when I lived in Victorian Village every Sunday, and my husband would say, why don't you just buy a pint? It's cheaper. And I was like, well, I like the experience. I like going in there. I like talking to them. I like that experience. And my challenge to my team when we started Besa, I was a team of one. My challenge to myself was how to provide that Jenny's experience for volunteers wherever they show up. Because the key isn't that a volunteer, a nationwider, shows up once. It's that they show up again and again and again and bring their colleagues, their friends, their family, because that's when real impact can happen. But you're right, Dan, volunteer rates are at historic lows for a variety of reasons. The pandemic definitely supercharged that. It's not because of the pandemic. Trends in getting married later and having children later in life and all kinds of other things. But it's also an opportunity for us to do a better job of showing up.
I also, the pandemic did its thing. But there's also, I'm new to Columbus, so I took over the position in January, so I'm still learning a lot of the things. But being immersed in community, one of the things that, and keeping your ear to the ground and actually getting to know your partners, one of the pantries that is in Franklinton told me we don't have as many volunteers as we once did, because the people we used to get volunteers from were from churches. Well, now churches have their own food programs because now they're working with larger organizations, right? And so who we accept food from, we cannot accept food from everyone, and we can't accept, and do the way, we can't work in the ways that we used to work. And so there's programming changes as well in how people are functioning. And a lot of service organizations, people who, outside of Besa, a lot of people who volunteer from service out of either their faith or some service organization. And so I invite us to stay in community too about how our systems are working as far as volunteers and who we're partnering with and how that may cause barriers to other organizations who are also seeing a decline in volunteers, not just because of COVID.
So if we think of the important trifecta of supporting the nonprofit field is time, talent, and treasure. We've talked about volunteerism. Let's switch to hard dollars. In 2 weeks, CMC is going to be hosting the lead researcher from the Lilly School of Family Philanthropy, which is the originator of the Giving USA report. A headline in the Chronicle of Philanthropy that covered a prior year report was fundraising in 2022 was among the worst ever. Furthermore, in 2022, giving dropped 10.5% after inflation, marking only the fourth time that donations had fallen since it was being tracked since 1956. Should we be alarmed about that state of giving? And save some of the answers for the speakers in 2 weeks. But in terms of your own experiences here and now, that's an alarming headline. Let's talk about the dollars.
Well, sorry, press the button. Yeah, I think that headline, when I first read it, was alarming, and it really made me look at our data at Nationwide. I think we are seeing, so we're about 50% of our associates give their treasure. which is high when you look at the corporate world, but it's down from some of our highest we've ever been at was 80%. So you see there is a drop there. You know, when we talk about all the pressures that are on people with inflation, I mean, it doesn't matter really what your income level is, you're feeling that pressure, and I think sometimes that goes to additional funds you may have to give to nonprofits. But one thing we've really been finding, and you talked about it's not just COVID, but thinking of the system working differently, is looking at some of the other, younger generations and how they like to give. And so we're exploring a new grants management system. So everyone, this is a preview for that if you're going to ask for funding from Nationwide. But one of the things that we've been talking about is, if like I pay my babysitters through Venmo. No longer do you have the a lot of times kids, I would say kids, but other people don't write checks, or it's not the planned giving that maybe other generations have done. And so as nonprofit organizations, as corporate organizations, are we coming up with solutions that speak to the way you like to give? And also, are we creating different opportunities? I know we like to go after those large legacy gifts, but should we also be cultivating, $20 gifts and $10 gifts? And if we are, what's the easiest way to get those gifts? And so that's something that we're looking at Nationwide, as we're trying as we look at our data and giving, but it is something that I'm thinking of, and I'm trying to instill in my kids and myself that the giving needs to be a necessity. And so when my kiddos get money, and my parents did this with us, like half of it goes in the bank and you have 50% left, 25% you need to give away. And so I have a very entrepreneurial daughter, which a lot of you have heard stories of. She's always arguing with me, well, maybe I should just invest that and keep it more, and then later I can give more to the nonprofit. And while that may be smart thinking, sometimes I'm like, no, we need, the help, you need to help now. And so I think if we can have those conversations and instill more, I think hopefully we can start to see the trends change.
I was going to add to that and say that it is alarming numbers, but it also allows us to kind of reimagine how we deliver services. And it also has us to reimagine what we do well. So our entities from what we do well are those avenues to attract new funders or new givers. And also, and as we look at that, that 30 to 40, 25 to 30, they want to support. How do we get to them? Not always just through the electronic giving or that. Let them have the experience. How do we connect with those different levels of giving? And the other thing that I have just sort of in my research come up with is that we have to begin to think about philanthropy in a new definition. That is not always the upper echelon of those who are giving. I have plenty of young people and seasoned people who come to the Lincoln for a series, and they're there for 12 months, 10 months, but they're giving every time they come. That's philanthropy. And so as we're talking about the young people who want to come in and learn their internship there, and they want to say, hey, here, I saved up $25, here's my gift. So when we begin to think about philanthropy and funnel it down to the categories and also to what we're able to provide inside of that, what do we do? I have some information to share when we get to that question. I'm sorry. But I'll preface it with this, is that now we're looking at, in our nonprofit at the Lincoln, we're looking at how we can give the young people or the artists, local artists, community artists, opportunity to come in, be educated, and inside of that education of the front of house, back of house, and stipend is given for a paid internship. What do you do with that? Do you go over to Adelphi and open your account, and then your payments go there, or then you can make your annual gift to the Lincoln or to other profits that are of your giving? Yeah. So just reimagining what we do well, and also putting some new definition on philanthropy.
So let's keep chasing the dollar and acknowledge the American Rescue Plan Act and the ARPA dollars. Nationally, more than $1.9 trillion flowed from that program. The Brookings Institute and the Urban Institute has a tracker that then showed locally that $1.5 billion made its way to Franklin County and the City of Columbus governments. We're seeing a number of organizations panicking at the end of these ARPA dollars and almost a funding cliff. What experience do either your organizations have or your peer organizations have navigating the state of funding amid increased expenses, potentially decreased revenues, especially with public dollars?
I'm going to answer that question as well as the last one together concisely. Your question about should we be worried? Yes, we should be worried because there's a lot of need out there, and the need is going to continue to grow. But we shouldn't be fearful, right? We know what we need to do as organizations and as a community, and we have to stay the course. As soon as I start getting worried and freaking out, my advancement leader, Paul, over here, starts to freak out too. And that is not a good space for either of us, for our organization, for our team, for this community, right? We're not able to serve. The dollars are out there, right? I remember, I think it was last year when the professor came, she talked about how a lot of dollars are flowing into the online giving, what are those called? The GoFundMe type pages, and sometimes away from donations. The dollars are there. We just have to continue to make our case clearly as to why it's important to invest in nonprofits. ARPA dollars are also scary because we are one of those organizations that got some dollars, maybe not as many dollars as some of the larger organizations, but we got some dollars, and we're gonna have to make up those dollars somehow to continue to employ our staff, to continue to purchase the supplies and the needs to run this organization, but the need is there. I fully believe in the power of civic engagement to bring people together, and dollars going away from one bucket isn't going to stop us, and is definitely not going to stop any of these organizations up here from doing our job.
Any other perspectives on ARPA? Well, Kristen, with your corporate philanthropy hat on, does this put an outsized expectation on foundations?
The ARPA conversation has been something we've definitely had conversations with our partners from the beginning. I think we're Nationwide. One of the things I'm proud about at Nationwide is that it's truly a partnership with our nonprofit partners, and so we had some internal conversations, and I think you saw some corporate. Depending on the business that you're in, and if your profits were up or down, maybe decrease some funding when there was ARPA funding available. Nationwide chose not to do that. So we, for all 4 years, have continued our level of giving and have had really open conversations with our nonprofit partners about what does this look like when this funding goes away. I do think that there are some expectations that the corporate sector will step in, and the philanthropic sector in general, big philanthropists, family foundations. Unfortunately, we don't have the money that the federal government has, don't have $1.9 trillion to give away. And so I think that, having these conversations, we feel our partners are, to Matthew's point, in good spaces, and that they will continue the good work, and they're very open and honest with us on what support they need. But across the nation, as we have these conversations in different venues, it is something that continually comes up: is who is going to step into that void. And I really loved your answer, Matthew, and I think I might steal that. And in some of the spaces I go to, that as this major funding goes away, the work can't stop and won't stop. We just need to figure out different ways, more innovative ways to do it.
Gabrielle, you've mentioned that you're a new executive director, new to Columbus as well. What has your experience been about this state of nonprofit organizations from a leadership perspective when you think of the broader ecosystem outside of Franklinton?
I think that Franklinton is a very special place as I continue to build relationship with others and in other communities. When I first got to Franklinton, during the first couple weeks, I learned that they partner differently than some other nonprofits. There's what's called a nonprofit collaborative, where every nonprofit in Franklinton meets every month just to share announcements, news, what's going on, what's happening. And then we partner, the farms partners with Sanctuary Night, Lower Lights. We partner with the food pantry because they have a lot of waste, so we go pick up their compost so that we can help them. We partner with each other, the Board of Trade, Trent, everybody knows each other because they work with each other. And that's not the case that I've learned in every community. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I tell people there are so many growers who are trying to use our growing model, and I say you should use their relationship model. And that relationship model has been far more impactful than the growing model, though it is a sizable scale. But I really think that what I've learned about Columbus, and most specifically Franklinton, is that they partner differently, and they partner in a way that they don't necessarily need a photo shoot about. I mean, we laugh, but that's the case. You know, people get partnered just so that they say that they're doing work. And we need to move beyond that. Like, we have to stop, you know. The photo ops are old, you know. It's unnecessary these days. We need more impactful work, and that's when I tell people, I will sign up and I'm willing to do it if we're gonna do some work. So Franklinton, they work.
What is CMC's longstanding tradition to take audience questions, and so we'll move to questions from our live stream and in-person audiences momentarily. You can join Doug at the microphone if you're here in the room, and if you're online, please enter your questions in the chat, and we will make sure that we get to them. We have talked about a lot of subjects that maybe nonprofits don't often always talk about because they're not the rainbows and unicorns about the sector. So let's end as we transition to the questions from the audience with something a little bit more positive. What gives you each hope about the work that you get to do?
Well, I'll start. What gives me hope really is our community and all of us. I mean, and you saw those themes throughout this conversation. I know, having worked in this sector for quite a while, that we will make it through, and it's because of each of you and the partnerships that we have. So I have a lot of faith in our community and in our partnerships. I know that things will be thrown at us, and they have been thrown at us, but together, by open and honest communication and sharing, I know that we'll get through it.
What gives me hope is seeing neighbors work together. Quite honestly, we have what's called a home victory program, and we help neighbors start a garden in their backyard. We give them the tools that they need, and then we see their kids come. We just see, that gives me hope, that watching neighbors who don't know each other, who foster a relationship at our weekly tea time. They come eat tea, drink tea, not eat tea. They come drink tea. And y'all, there's no sugar or honey or anything in this tea. It's herbs from the garden that we put with hot water, and the babies love it too. So that gives me hope that a baby will save a little worm that he saw because the soil needs it, and he has his tea. And, you know, Miss Gabrielle, I want to make sure that I got my sunchoke, but I can't hurt the worm, so can you go get me some tea, please? That gives me hope, that the baby wanted to save his worm and drink his tea with no sugar and dig his sunchoke. That gives me hope.
That's what gives me hope is the humanity that we're able to provide and share and invite people to come into. The Lincoln Theater is very multi-generational, and we are having programs for pre-K up to 12th grade, but also into the college setting, in the academic setting, and then also for our seasoned community artists are there. We're really about the artist and the audience, and we're making sure that there is a positive trajectory for them to be balanced in their art form, and that we know that balance gives energy to the world.
What gives me hope is, one, that we are alive, that we are here, that we have an opportunity. There's a lot of challenges in the world. When you turn on the news, when you turn on social media, a lot of negative energy coming our way, but there's also an opportunity to put positive energy out there. And each of us have that opportunity. And when it happens, beautiful things happen. Community gets built. And that gives me a lot of hope.
I'll now turn it over to Doug Buchanan from the Columbus Metropolitan Club to curate our online questions. And as a reminder, if you're in the room and have a question, please make your way to the microphone. Doug.
Dan, thank you very much, and thank you to today's panelists for an inspiring conversation. Again, if you do have a question for today's panelists, please do join us here at the microphone, and if you're watching online, please type your questions into the chat. Please do keep in mind that great questions at CMC have two things in common. They can be asked in 30 seconds or less, and what do they end in? A question mark. Thank you. I love our repeat guests. First question, I'll launch us off. This one comes from Michael Corey with the Human Service Chamber. How are nonprofit organizations, especially service organizations, preparing for a future in which state and federal funding may look radically different from today? If the White House does change hands, do you anticipate changes to funding for nonprofits and for health and human services in particular?
It's always good to get the first question from Michael Corey. A light question. Hello out there to Michael Corey. Yes, if the administration changes, it's going to be hard, and there's going to be a lot of fighting, and I'm grateful that Michael Corey and his team and so many of us are dedicated to having that fight, because we need the funds to flow, we need the people at the table to do this work, and even with the current administration, right, there's always going to be a fight to do this work. There's so much work that nonprofits did during the pandemic. There's so many lives that we try to uplift and support with limited funds. And then you think about what happened with employees and retention and people going away and volunteerism going away. There are a lot of challenges, and yes, it will be harder with administration changes, but it's nothing new. This isn't new. This has been going on for decades, hundreds of years, do I dare say thousands of years. We can do it.
Gabrielle, does Franklinton Farms receive any federal trickle down from like a USDA program that might be?
Yes and no. So yes, money-wise, but what we will see, I try to keep most of the conversation on our local level and our neighbors. So we have different people who give. We have, 15% of our giving comes from our neighbors, and so there's a change in the colorful neighborhood. Of the people who are showing up, right? And so how it affects our volunteers, and ideology really disrupts a lot of things, and so one of the things that I'm, outside of money, we could talk about money and data all the time, but it matters of heart, and how you build relationship. Funding and money is about relationship. And so if you jump down in your heart, below your neck, below your head, into your chest and build relationship, there's a lot of things that can happen and change if we're creative with it. So yes, money will change, politics will change, all of those things will change. Like Matthew said, it's nothing new. But how you build relationship, that matters, and so that can fill that gap and those barriers sometimes.
Susan, anything within the highly creative vertical of arts funding worth noting?
Of course. Again, I just want to say with this question here, resiliency. We were just talking, Chad and Kristen and I, and we were talking about how things change every day, every hour inside of our nonprofit arena. And so I think when we sit in our resiliency and sit in what our missions are, then we can continue to have some success of what we do. As far as the art funding, whoa. Okay. We've been very fortunate, again, being a recipient of the art money and also becoming first-time recipients of the National Endowment of the Arts. And so that has been those coupled together. Thank you. And inside of that, not just in one stream of funding, but also in some of the other programs that we're doing that is very innovative as far as how we bounce back from where we've come from. So inside of that, again, I'm saying that branches of our programs are very attractive. So inside of our summer camp, so to speak, and Fridays at 4 o'clock, if you want to come see the kids perform, do that. But for our summer camp, we have a group of activities assistants from 18 to 22. And what we're doing now is finding the workforce development opportunities there. And so that funding is coming from a new source to say, hey, we want these young people to be immersed in what they love doing and also being paid and also supporting the workforce of Columbus.
Thank you. Sir.
My name is Brian Urbanski with the Aubrey Affordable Housing Foundation, and we provide, as a nonprofit, we provide housing to the Salvation Army, the Columbus Urban League, Alvis House, and many other, over 80 other nonprofits here in Central Ohio. We're hearing a recurring theme here where we're struggling a bit in this community to find volunteers as well as funding. And the challenge that we have is in the housing space, we have actually beds available today, but our partners don't have the funds to be able to support their clients. And my question to you is, do you have any outside of the box or creative ideas we could pass along to them so we can support their clients and get them the housing that they need to address this affordable housing crisis?
So I can start. You know, I know what you're talking about, and that's something that we have been working on and looking at across the nation. And I've seen some really cool examples in the Phoenix area, the greater Phoenix area, especially with Medicaid funding. And so I am getting actually more information from some of the partners that we fund on how they're getting those beds paid for. And, you know, we're happy to share that information once we receive everything.
So I am new as we've shared, as I've shared, and I'm interested in your question as well, because I have the unhoused folk who take up residence in our high tunnels, and I'm trying to find the resources to help bridge those gaps too, right? I'll let you sleep as long as when you get up, you don't mess up a crop, or you get up and you take your stuff and you can come back, just, you know, introduce yourself, and that's when I introduce to the neighbor and say, it's warm in the high tunnel. I'm not going to tell you you can't come in there, but I'm asking people, you know, where do I send them? And someone can't tell me where, you know, so I'm interested as well. I don't have the answer to the question, but very interested in the information.
Hi, I'm Karen Mosenter from Jewish Family Services. And you've spoken a lot today about the impact of the nonprofit sector and the good that our sector does in the community and the opportunity that it gives others to do good. And I'm hoping that you could speak a little about the other kind of impact that is often lost that our sector offers the community, and that's the economic impact that we bring, both as employers and by virtue of the work that we do and the impact that it has on people's lives.
So I would start as far as the Lincoln Theater is concerned about the economic impact. For our constituents who come to the Lincoln, the local artists who are there, we have invested into their business of their artistry and their craft. And now those artists who have come through our incubation program, which is a 12-month program, to learn the business of their artistry, are now being sought after to perform with corporations, organizations, schools, all of the different entities or non-traditional organizations that might come to the Lincoln. And so now we're seeing that exchange where these artists are being paid. Artists are being paid for their craft. And also being able to be supported there, that in turns provide them to do other things, whether it's their sole stream of income or if it's supplemented. And now they're able to do some more work there inside of their craft and being able to impact the economy that way, but also in an artistic way, if I've answered your question.
I would just add that when Besa started in 2012, employee number one, budget of $24,000. You can do the math. I think my salary was $200 a month. You can't do much, you know, on that. Definitely can't pay rent. But now we have 21 people on staff, full-time people on staff. And it's a privilege and an honor, and sure, definitely scary as hell to pay payroll every 2 weeks, but it's a privilege because these are dedicated people that are passionate about uplifting and building community. And they get to dedicate their careers to doing good work. And then I'm afforded the opportunity to pay them a salary, and they're contributing to the economy and to the city in beautiful, brilliant ways. And yet we're a small nonprofit, 21 people, but it's such a privilege, it's such an honor to be able to contribute to the community and to my team in that way.
And I would just add, you know, and I don't have the exact amount in Franklin County, but what I would, you know, love too is that you bring in a lot of money. You bring in federal dollars that wouldn't have been there, and that money gets put to work. And so I think that it would be great. I don't know, Dan, if you have that information or not, but you know, it'd be great to see the holistic impact, not just the workforce impact, which I think, you know, Suzan and Matthew did a great job of explaining, but also the impact of the work that you're doing. You're bringing in money that wouldn't be circulating in our economy if not for the work that you do.
And since Kristen asked, I'm happy to answer, and it seems a little less self-promoting in that sense, but the most recent Franklin County Economic Impact Report of the nonprofit sector is publicly available for free on the Columbus Foundation's website. It was in partnership with the Human Service Chamber and GCAC, and that's one way that we share the community knowledge to everybody, and I hope you find that report useful.
My name is Chelsea Elliott, and I'm the founder and CEO of SomoCom Lab, which is a social enterprise, not a nonprofit, that focuses on emotional intelligence for kids and adults. I have a 7-year-old daughter. Her name is Natalie, and she is very passionate about the community, like crazy passionate about the community and cleaning up trash. And she's been passionate about this for two years. And so we just started her nonprofit, Natalie's Community Cleanup Club, but it's not official. I know, right? She's precious, y'all. She's amazing. But I am terrified to actually start it and register it because of, you know, we're having this conversation today, and what does nonprofithood look like in the future? And so I was wondering if you all can give some advice to people who are looking to start a nonprofit that's different than when you started. So what is something that you all would say to somebody who's like, let's do this, and you're like, wait, hold on. What would you advise them to do?
I would say lean on those who have done it, you know, essentially. Those are people in this room. As a newcomer, that has been very beneficial to me, to learn the lay of Columbus, and then partner with people where you are first, where you are. Who are the communities that can do work with you, then volunteer with you? You know, Matthew here, he just volunteers to help clean up. And so I would say, yes, start at home, start where you are, and start small, but lean on the knowledge in this room and in these spaces, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Be encouraged. Be encouraged. You know, nonprofits address needs in any area, any genre, and that's club. I have my 85-year-old mother out back here, and she's also an advocate for cleanup with the community, so she could be Natalie's partner.
As someone who started a nonprofit, I would say it's a not-for-profit, but in the tax code, it's a not-for-profit business, right? And it's got to be run like a business, and everything that goes into running a business, like doing a business plan. 85% of businesses fail because there's no business plan. And the one last thing I want to share quickly is, one, I can't wait to meet Natalie and clean up with her. I have a 2-year-old daughter, Evie, who will help. But two, it also goes back to Karen's comment. When nonprofits are employing people and doing good work, and that builds community, it creates a vibrant community, it then brings more people to this community, and it just creates this upward cycle that makes Columbus more accessible to more people.
As a working mom with 3 kids, it is a business you have to run, so you might want to partner with another nonprofit so that you, mom, don't have to get stuck running that nonprofit. But I, too, would love to meet Natalie.
She does already have a partnership, and I was like, oh, no, I have more to do. But this is great. Thank you all so much.
And I am getting the wrap-up signal, and I wish we had more time. And it is time to turn over the podium to Bob Hydorn of Columbia Gas of Ohio, who are our other sponsor for today. Bob, the podium's yours.
Thanks, Dan. So, as I thought about today's event, I realized I've got the best role of anybody here. I get to say thank you to everybody in this room for your dedication for serving people in our communities. And I want to quickly observe something. A blessing that we didn't create a drinking game today where we drank every time the word community was used, because none of us would be driving home. But I think this is a community. It's a beautiful community in this room. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to the Columbus Metropolitan Club for hosting us. My name is Bob Hydorn. I've been in this role as president, COO of Columbia Gas for about 60 days. You talk about opportunity. There's opportunity. But the team, the Columbia Gas team, and I want to thank you for the opportunity we have to work with you to help our communities. And as I was getting ready for today, I wanted to try and share some wisdom to honor you. So, of course, not words from me, but from somebody better than me. So here's a statement that touched me. Everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. That was Martin Luther King. So the State of the Not-Profits it's an event Columbia Gas is honored to sponsor every year. We acknowledge the incredible work you all do for our communities and our customers. Its importance cannot be overstated. So thank you truly for the grace that you share every day. We at Columbia and our foundation are committed to supporting you on an ongoing basis, do whatever we can. We appreciate your guidance in helping our customers so that they can heat their homes, heat their meals, and together we can make a difference. But as I've heard today, the work is never done. So I want to thank the presenting sponsor, Nationwide, and our forum sponsors, the Benefactor Group, Besa, I learned how to pronounce that appropriately today, Carlisle, Patchen and Murphy, Columbia Gas of Ohio, Kramer and Associates, G2G Consulting, Installed Business Products, and the New Directions Career Center. Thank you to Vue Columbus for hosting us, to the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and the Columbus Dispatch for supporting today's live stream. And thank you to this incredible panel. You guys are all inspiring. I was just thrilled to listen to you and learn a lot. Suzan Bradford, Gabrielle Fields, Matthew Goldstein, Kristen Rost, and our host, Dan Sharpe. Couple of announcements. There's no forum next week as we celebrate Juneteenth. They'll be back at the Ellis in the Italian Village on June 26th for the next forum titled Why Charitable Giving Matters, writing checks, as we were reminded today. And then thank you again to everybody. We couldn't do it without you. We do serve communities, and there's nothing more important. Thank you.